So here we are starting at the end of our timeline, the 20th century, the 1940s, the fascist era. Okay, and this fascism is a style, and it's a political name. Right? That's not always the case. Renaissance isn't a not you don't wouldn't there was no such thing as a Renaissance government. It's considered a more basic name of a period, but fascism was a political movement as well as a period that had its own style of art and architecture, right? And it's the era of the fascist regime, which is approximately 1922 to 1942. It ends with Italy's withdrawal from World War II, having been allied with Nazi Germany. They, as Italians are quite good at doing, managed to get out while the getting was good and change sides, right? And politically and economically survive much, much better than they would have if they had continued to a much more severe defeat as Nazi Germany underwent, right? So they got out of the war, World War II. So very basic, there's a lot to it, but Mussolini is the duce, the leader of this regime, okay? And this is when an enormous amount of modernization takes place in Italy, right? Modernization on a technological, industrial, economic aspect, socially. Remember that you have this long transition from primarily Italy being an agrarian, agricultural-based society to being more and more industrial, entering what we call, generally the modern era. One thing that, the typical thing they always said about Mussolini was, well, he made the trains run on time, right? And so that kind of really sums it up, this idea of the severity and the precision of the industrial era, which is a far cry from what had preceded it, right? Now, the fascist era, like so many eras, artistically and politically, they tend to look back to ancient Rome. Why might that be? Have you guys seen anything in ancient Rome yet? Seen the Colosseum or anything yet? It's pretty impressive, right? So you have the living memory everywhere you go, especially in Rome, but this is true for a great deal around Italy as well, of this past, right? It's physically present. And centuries ago, it was even more physically present because so much of it has been damaged through being rebuilt or reused, right? So even today, we can't see, I'm not sure, even from, right over there, the Palatine Hill, the Palace of the Emperor is practically within view and stuff. So this memory, this physical memory of the past defines this culture throughout most of its eras. And here in the fascist era, they too are looking back to that glorious Roman past, right? And it's not a coincidence that in, I can't remember, maybe it was 1936, Mussolini declared an empire, a new empire. So he even is, copying ancient Rome on that level, right? And the architectural spirit of the time is definitely related as well to movements that were going out throughout the industrialized world, and that is to say, United States and more or less Western Europe at that point, communist Russia, Soviet Russia, this USSR as it was known at that time, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, right? So they were all modernizing and industrializing in their own ways, right? But you'll find, you visit any of those places, the kinds of buildings were all much more functional than they had been before, a lot less decorative. And this is called rational, a rational use, rationalism, right? So this kind of art, its basis is called rationalism, right? Now, it's going to have its local flavors, and inevitably, in Italy, with the preponderance of this great Roman past, that rationalism is going to have something romantic about it, which is that, romance literally in the sense of this idealized past, the glory of the Roman emperors, the glory of Caesar, and this patrimony that was to be seen everywhere you go. the greatest example being something like a Colosseum. Right? So what's the Colosseum made out of? Literally, what is it made out of? It's made out of a porous stone called travertine. I think there's some right there behind you. That wall's made out of it, the lower part. You see where it's like all kind of stripes and it's all quite porous, right? This is a local limestone. Tivoli, a beautiful little day trip for you outside of Rome, the local train. You've got to visit Tivoli. They still quarry travertine there. That's what the Colosseum is made out of. That's what St. Peter's is made out of, and that's what this is made out of, right? So this is intentional. You know, it's recalling that Roman past already through simply the materials that are used, right? And then what else do you see in abundance of in ancient Rome? Inscriptions. Inscriptions, especially when you get to the empire, where an emperor might build an aqueduct and write an inscription, your, father of the country, head priest, monarch, and so on, that kind of thing, giving the people this beautiful and healthy sustenance of water, made this aqueduct in such and such a year, and so on, right? So there's a lot of celebratory inscriptions, right? And what do we see in the fascist era? Well, again, that same kind of thing. We'll see more specifically closer up. What we see up there, it's, anybody know what that says? Roma, you got that part. Rome or death. Rome or death, right? So what else can we say when you look at that regarding the fascist era? It's very nationalistic. Rome as the capital of Italy. Remember, this is 1940. Rome had only been the capital of Italy for less than 70 years. It was still within living memory of a few people in 1942, that Rome had been ruled by the Pope. The church was the government, right? Now, in the 1840s, right, Italy was divided up as it had been for centuries into all these little countries, and Rome was ruled by the church, as were the lands surrounding it, the papal state, right? And in 1848, there was an enormous political upheaval throughout Europe. All kinds of protest movements and changing of governments, and liberalism was on the rise, and this affected Rome. And at a certain point, the upheavals led to the Pope abandoning Rome and a Roman Republic being declared, right? So they, are going to produce a constitution, the local leaders. You think of like the stories of the Revolutionary War in the United States, where they write their Declaration of the Independence, or the French Revolution of 1789, the universal rights of man, all those ideals of what's called the Enlightenment. The idea of free thinking individuals, right? Which is a huge change from the Middle Ages and what had gone before, right? So here in the 1840s, there was this attempt to create this local state with those kinds of what are called liberal ideals. But the Pope had been driven out, and it was with the assistance of the French, that was a very conservative government in 1849, that they literally reconquered Rome. It was the French army that conducted the battle. And where we are looking out over the city, this is the high ground, this is the strategic ground. And the wall of the city and that gateway that I pointed out just beyond us, that's where this retaking of the city commenced. So these battles taking place in the spring of 1849 were vicious. And you had the Italian patriots. You might have heard of Garibaldi. He's going to play a part throughout this long history that leads to Italy becoming a modern state. So this is one of those phases of that story. And hundreds and hundreds of Italian idealistic patriots died where we're standing, fighting these French. As the French tried to move in, breach these walls, set up cannon, they were bombing Trastevere, right? Bombing the city in 1850. The Americans and the other ambassadors protested to the French because everybody was already obviously aware of this great patrimony of art and history that was already in this city. But this was about restoring the power and the authority of the Pope. Amazingly, this Roman Republic won a couple battles. they captured 300 prisoners of war, the French troops, which stupidly, as it turned out, as a gesture of goodwill, later on they freed, because they were convinced that the French would take that gesture as an opportunity to negotiate, but they didn't. And ultimately, the French, through numerical superiority and having a proper military, against this ragtag group of idealists, they defeated them, and the Pope was reinstalled. And it would be another 20-odd years that the Pope continued to rule as an institution. So it's an important story in the history of Italy's unification, and you'll see statues of these heroes throughout the area. And this being built much more recently in the 1940s is a memorial to those patriots that died. So again, it's part of the history of the fascist era, looking back to ancient Rome, looking back to the patriots that had made Italy a modern nation state. And it's an ossuary. That's what this is called. It's an ossuary, which is spelled with 2 S's, which literally means a gigantic funeral urn. There's the bones, the remains of what they could find of a number of these patriots who were buried in the area. Some of them, their bodies were removed. One of the most famous, who always comes up, is named Mameli. I would never quiz you on that, but that's his name. He wrote the Italian national anthem, right? He was only 22 when he died on this hill, or 21. But his anthem to this day is the Italian national anthem. So it's a place with a lot of history, and it's interesting. Of course, it's unrecognizable. This would have been already countryside with a few villas, farmhouses. It's been much more built up since then, right? Okay. So that's the history. That's the why. That's why we're here. Right? Now, I've also described to you a little bit of this idea of the fascist approach to the architecture, using the materials of ancient Rome and something stylistically of Rome, the arches and so on. So you could say this is this kind of crossover between the rationalism, which is the modernist style of the 20th century, combined with this overarching patrimony of ancient Rome, which is so present through every era, and it gets interpreted. It's like the same song being interpreted by different performers over the centuries, you could say. Okay? So why don't we go closer and go take a look inside. Yeah, something like that, see? And then like I can take the little bit of my blurb and combine it with that kind of little traveling, and then combine it with some close-up photos, some of the details, and there you go.
What was the name of this movie?
It's the ossuary.
It's just the ossuary?
The ossuary of the Gianicolo, I guess.
Okay.
There's probably an official, oh actually, here, take a look. Right here, I just want to point this out. Come take a look. These boards you find kind of all around, and there's a perfect thing to take a picture of. It's like automatic notes, because it's in English as well as Italian. So you have a little summary of what I just told you about the Roman Republic, and then specifically about the mausoleum. So here they put it in the same, it's in Italian as it was in English, Mausoleum Ossuary. So in English we'd say it's an ossuary mausoleum. So you can use the Italian term or the English term, whatever you want. But that's a nice resource. You'll find that in front of a lot of places that we visit. So I always encourage you to take pictures of those kind of things. And also a lot when we visit museums, the little blurbs, the blurbs and stuff that you'll find describing works of art. Those are perfect things to grab a picture of, and then you've got something a reference. Right? Okay, so now let's take a look over here. So the smaller inscriptions are various battles. So you have the various encounters that were where these men and women gave their lives. A great example is Garibaldi's wife Anita, who was actually South American because he had spent a lot of time there. She was something like 6 months pregnant when she joined him here. And you could imagine this pregnant woman dressed like a bandit who was literally, fighting alongside her husband. And she actually died when they escaped because they managed to escape. And he would, live to fight another day. But his wife died along the way. So, these people believed in their cause, and many of them gave their lives for it. Right? Again, you have the kind of imagery which is directly from ancient Rome. So the eagle with the wreath of victory, you can find examples of that look pretty much the same, that are 2,000 years old. It's an ancient Roman thing. The eagle is the symbol of Jupiter. It's the symbol of the emperor, right? It's a symbol of glory, right? As is the laurel wreath, symbol of victory. Right? And below, what do you guys see in the middle of that? I guess you'd call that a cenotaph. See the animal? It's the wolf. It's the Capitoline wolf. You see the two little babies suckling at the teats? So that's the founding of Rome. Have you heard of them, Romulus and Remus? The founders of Rome. We'll see the original statue that's based on, that goes back to the 5th century BC. Right? Yes, so the symbol SPQR, a symbol again of Rome, going back to antiquity. Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and people of Rome. It was the declaration, it was on the standards, it was the symbol of official documents and so on, and it's still the symbol of the city. So you'll see it all around Rome. Now, this symbol is interesting, the fasciae. What it is, and this is where the word fascism derives from, and in fact, even today in Italian, a fascio can mean like a bound up, a bunch of things, just all bound up together. Like a fascicolo is a whole bunch of documents that are all been tied up together. Fascio, it's all bound up together. And what it consisted of was sticks, and these number of sticks were grouped around an axe, and the axe was inside the sticks, and then they're all bound up. So that has a symbolic meaning because it symbolizes unity, right? Bound up and unified. And it was the symbol of authority. So like the judges of ancient Rome, their authority, and that is the authority to pass sentence, which can be life or death. Naturally, that meant that they have the power of violence, right? And they would be accompanied by what were called the lictors, and these were soldiers that were carrying these things. Now, as far as I understand it, because I don't pretend to know everything, it was a symbolic thing. I don't see how that could have any kind of function. A bunch of sticks with an axe in the middle. Like, how are you supposed? I don't think it was like meant to be anything other than a symbol. It's not like you were functionally using it to chop somebody's head off or something. But that is where the word fascism arrives. So as a political movement, even the name comes from this ancient Roman patrimony, right? The symbol of the fasciae, the symbol of strength through numbers, through unity, right? Now, another typical aspect of the fascist era is when you see the inscriptions, right? Now, I've mentioned the inscriptions of ancient Rome. The inscriptions of ancient Rome are more often than not dedications, and they recognize somebody, maybe their contribution, right? You have funerary inscriptions and so on, but they are such as I described earlier, right? These inscriptions are not that. These are much more the fascist approach. And what that consists of is exhortation. You familiar with the word exhortation? If you're not, look it up. To exhort is to encourage, to stir emotionally, to take words and use those words to promote and create movement. And that can be obviously positive or negative. It depends on how those words are used, right? But that idea of striving for an ideal, like think of like the Olympics or the Olympian, you know, to be the best you can be, that kind of thing, right? That's what an exhortation is. So our videographers should take some pictures of them and I'll tell you what they say and you'll get an idea. This one, what does it say? Giovanni, young. Avanti, forward, the youth, go forward, and we will win. Monte dietro il galoppo senza orma. Gallop forward. I'm not sure what senza orma. Orma would be, I guess, like faster than the shadows, meaning go forward. It's like, you know, encouraging your companions to fight, right? This is an exhortation. I think one of the greatest examples, I don't know how many of you like Shakespeare, but I love Henry V. Once more unto the breach. He's getting everybody to win the battle, right? Let's see what this one says. Also today, the white, what's a mantello? A mantello is a cape, like a cape, right? That one I don't know, and I can't tell what it says. I'll have to look it up. But you get the idea. This one already gives you enough of the idea. All right. So we saw on the outside Rome or death, and here youth, go forward, be victorious. So this whole idea of exhortations, this is a big part of this idea. Okay. Now let's come around the other side. Huh? Palpito, yeah, but I'm not sure like in what's the whole. Anyway, we'd have to look it up. So the architect's name is right there, Jacobucci. Now this is a good little detail that I would take a picture of, right? And it's interesting because what do you see? The year 1941, and then there's two X's. You know your Roman numerals?
20.
20. X is 10, so two X's is 20, right? Why is there the number 20 there? Because it's the 20th year of the fascist era. So you'll find around Rome a lot of inscriptions in occasionally places where it'll say EF, EF for Era Fascista, fascist era, and then the year. So like let's say some building got built in 1925. That's 3 years after the establishment of the fascist government, so that's year 3. And this is another great example of these political movements of the first half of the 20th century. Whether it's the right with fascism or whether it's the left with communism, they're quite often two sides of the same coin because they both had these very strong ideals about changing human nature and this idea of exhortation. But the one was for, you know, the workers and so on, and that's to be the communists, and then the right wing was more for tradition, family, maybe monarchy or whatever. But they're both appealing to ideals, right? And for example, the French Revolution in 1789, one of the first things they did around 1790 was we're going to create a new world. You know, they killed the king. That's a huge deal if you think about it. When the king was considered ordained by God, you know, it's kind of a big deal. And they made a new calendar. They invented new months. They invented new names of the days. They're going to reinvent the world. It's called utopianism. Utopia, it's a place we can never get to. But it's a kind of a religious fanaticism. It's a religious belief. There's a beautiful future that we just have to get to, right? And that in the fascist utopia or the communist utopia, there's some perfect world that we're going to fight and arrive at, right? And so when you want to build utopia, you have to rebuild everything. And oftentimes that included like a new calendar, right? So the French Revolution they did that. I don't recall that there was a new calendar in the Soviet Union. They might have even done that in the early Russian Revolution, which is same period as fascism, right? And in the fascist era, it's a new calendar for a new era. So we see these ideas of these utopian ideas of building a new world, whether it's on the left or on the right. It's common to this period, and that's why you see the 20 there, right? So it also makes it easy to date things regarding the fascist era. This is just 1941, 1942, and it's interesting because not long after this was completed, 1 year later, fascist government fell, and Italy fell out of the war, and the fascist era was repudiated. But luckily in Italy, unlike Nazi Germany, it just didn't have that onus on it like Nazi Germany. So a huge amount of the fascist legacy is around us. And now that you've seen this, you'll recognize this style everywhere. There's post offices, there's schools, there's administrative buildings, because it was the political era that brought Italy into the modern industrial age. So it left its stamp everywhere, whether architecturally or economically and so on. So this is your first example of it. But now that I've pointed it out to you throughout our walks around Rome, I'll say, what era do you think that is? And you'll be able to pretty much tell when something's fascist era. And one of the big indicators is being made out of travertine like the Colosseum, all right?